Ben. I did a Bachelor of Physiotherapy, finished up 2 years ago, and I now work at one of the major hospitals here in Brisbane in ICU as one of the physios there, and have been at that hospital since I graduated. So that's what I'm up to.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia. I studied sport and exercise science here at ACU and graduated in 2013. I went on to do an honours with Collingwood Football Club down in Melbourne for that year, and then moved into a PhD for the 3 years following. I'm currently working as a sports science scientist for the Queensland Reds rugby union, so rugby union team in the Super Rugby competition.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew. I'm a second year student for exercise and sports science. I currently work at ACU on campus as a lab technician and outside of here as a sports trainer.
Great, thanks guys. So if you're listening guys, you can see we've got a fairly diverse range of people on the panel, so hopefully they can cover any questions that you do have about degrees here at ACU and also going forward into the workforce afterwards as well. So next up, we'll just get to Ben and Georgia, and if you could just tell us what a typical day looks like for you within your current roles. You go for it, Georgia.
Sure. So in sports science, obviously, it's a very much a blanket term, I think, for the roles that I have to play. So my day normally starts at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. I greet the players of a morning and run through a wellness and check in with them just to see if they're carrying any muscle soreness. Weigh them in of a morning as well. A few meetings, obviously medical meetings, and also just to check what the schedule is going to look like for that day. Big one for sports scientists in team sports, obviously, is GPS analysis. So set up GPS and monitor loads throughout each of our field sessions. And on top of that, in the afternoon, I assist in the gym sessions that we run during pre-season 4 days a week, in season twice or 3 times a week. So pretty big days, 12 hours generally, but very much enjoyable.
Cool, thank you, Georgia.
Yeah, my job's also pretty broad. It sort of depends on where I'm working in the hospital. I tend to mostly be in intensive care. Typically, I sort of get to work 6:45 to 7 o'clock, and sort of organise workload with the other physios who are in ICU. We then go up and have a multidisciplinary team handover where we walk around to all the patients in ICU with the doctors who are working on overnight and the nurses who are there overnight, and we discuss the plan for the patient for the day, what's going on, what do they need, what do we need to do for the person for the day. And then from there, I sort of have a load in ICU of about 6 patients a day, and they could be anyone from ventilated, sort of unconscious patients who I'm working with sort of to maintain lung function and looking after their heart, to sort of very sick patients who might be a bit more actively involved in treatment, where we're doing anything from walking to bed exercises to just basically trying to keep people as active as they can be, even in sort of while they're so acutely unwell. People are seen anywhere from sort of 2 to 4 times a day, all the way through to, we run a 24-hour service, so it's a bit of shift work, so all the way through to 10 o'clock, and then you're on call overnight there as well. So that's what it is there, but different parts of the hospital are all a little bit different. So.
And what part of your course at ACU made you want to go on to work within ICU rather than anything else?
I was lucky. I worked a little bit in hospitals while I was an undergrad student through some connections that I made on some early pracs, and just got interested really early on, and then was lucky enough in my last year to do a 6-week placement in an intensive care unit, and just loved it, fell in love with that sort of work, the sort of acute, really sick people, working so closely with doctors and sort of as many people as you do when you're working in ICU. So yeah, it started pretty early on in my degree with kind of getting some early contact with people who worked in those sort of more diverse areas.
Yeah, cool, thanks very much. So Matt, just obviously being a current student here, what does your day look like, not just for your actual study here, but how do you work that around your day-to-day life as well?
So I tend to start my working day at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, training with para-athletes or returned service league personnel. I then come to uni. I tend to use the facilities in the library or academic officer student success. We obviously have the in-class theory lectures, but then it's very hands-on with the exercise physiology lab, the gym, and the biomechanics hall in there.
Cool. And how many hours would that be typically on a day and on a weekly basis?
Typically on a day, 4 hours a day,
Yep.
or approximately 20 hours a week.
Yeah, and that's manageable with everything else going on in your life. You don't find it's you're spread too thin.
No,
No.
I'm a full-time student,
Yep.
so, and I'm able to work and
Yep.
deal with all the areas of my life, yes.
Cool. Thanks very much. So Ben and Georgia, going back to you guys, if you could just tell us a bit about the type of placements that you did whilst you were on your degree, and maybe you, Georgia, for whilst you're on your undergraduate, and then going on to your postgraduate studies as well, just what placements you did and how that set you up for going on to get the jobs you have done since.
Yeah, sure. So a big area of interest for me through my undergrad was applied sports science research. So we were lucky enough at ACU to have a leader in that field at the time who mentored me through research. So I was writing research when I was in my second year of my undergrad degree, and that was all in applied sports science. So rugby league data from Q Cup all the way through to NRL. I was analysing GPS data. So it was really, really handy because that was prac hours for me. I was learning a new skill, and I was building up a research profile while I was still studying. And then obviously finished the third year and was offered an internship / an honours project down at Collingwood Football Club. So it all kind of aligned for me. I was very lucky, applied for that and was fortunate enough to take out that position. So spent a year down there.
How did that work getting, obviously we're up here in Brisbane, but how did that work getting a position down there in Melbourne?
Yeah, it was just something that was posted up on ACU. At the time we'd had a link with Collingwood. So yeah, it had been advertised to all universities. I put my hat in the ring. I'm originally from Melbourne, so opportunity to work in an elite football club was obviously very interesting for me. And yeah, like I said, fortunate enough to get it, so made the move down there.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Yeah, we started prac right from first year, first few weeks. We were out doing observational pracs and interviews with physios, sort of in a broader range of areas than I think a lot of people come into physio. So I think a lot of people come in thinking of just sports physio, but right from the get-go they sent us out to sort of more unusual areas of physio to kind of get a bit of an idea about what was out there.
Did that really open your eyes up to see what broad roles you could get?
What is out there, yeah, because I think physio is a lot broader than a lot of people kind of understand and think about. And so for me, I found, right from the start, all of a sudden you're open to all of these new ideas, and then that's sort of what led me into looking into hospital jobs as an undergrad and kind of ended up where I am now. So then for the next few years you do pracs with sports teams and you're working there, but our whole last year is prac. So we work pretty much full time for the last year as part of the undergrad degree, and it's broken up into 6-week placements, which were fantastic. We got to put in preferences for where we'd like to go, types of placements we'd like to do depending on our interest area. You do have to do set types of placements, so you've got to do a neurology placement, you've got to do a cardiorespiratory and a musculoskeletal, but then you do get some flexibility there, which is fantastic because I think, like you said, that sort of job interviews, that prac time, all of that's working towards your career in the end, and so that's how I sort of look to approach it. And I was really lucky and fortunate that I got all placements in areas that I really wanted to work and wanted to sort of hopefully specialise in down the track.
And are all those placement opportunities, are they all local to Brisbane, or is there a chance for a bit of travel as well?
Yeah, I got to do a bit of travel as part of my degree. So I went and did one of my subjects over in Rome as part of the exchange program for a bit, and then did one of my placements in a hospital down in Sydney as well, just as part of that. But some of the physios that I went to, they did placements in Sweden and where was Denmark was the other one that one of my mates went and did it. So there's plenty of opportunity for travel as part of those rotating placements in your last year.
And did you feel that really helped prepare you to sort of hit the ground running when you?
Yeah, I think
your
so.
job
I
afterwards?
think it sort of sets you up with a really broad range of skills that you can take into sort of a broad profession. So a profession where you come out qualified to kind of step into an entry-level job doing anything. I sort of found that the more broader placements that I had and I put my hand up for to travel and all of those sorts of things, I think it sets you up really well to be able to then be good at what you're doing when you go in as a new grad.
Cool, thanks very much. Just one question for you now, Matt. Just what's been the most surprising thing so far about your degree and about your experience here at ACU so far?
So probably the most surprising thing for me is how approachable our lecturers are, and how assisting they are, and how much giving of their time and their knowledge they are. Dating back from last year in physiological base of exercise, the lecturers there were very helpful. Biomechanics, that's the most surprising thing for me.
Yeah, cool. And do you not think you'd have got that at a different institution, or is that, or do you think that would be the norm, or has that obviously shocked you a little bit?
It's probably just shocked me a little bit. My experience from other people's talk at other universities is they didn't have that approachability with the lecturers. So the lecturers here were very giving of their time.
Yeah, and that's obviously outside of your contact hours with them within, being accessible outside of lecture times, that was an easy thing to organise with them.
Correct. Yeah. If you needed some assistance, a basic question, it was very.
And what have you enjoyed most about the degree as well, in terms of whether it be specific content or the way it's delivered, or the people that you get to work with in classes?
The most enjoyable thing is taking what you learn in the classroom or the lab and applying it in the field.
Yeah.
I've received some messages today from athletes giving me some feedback.
Yeah.
On what we've just had basic discussion on, and it's just to see their eyes light up and be able to explain to them the science behind it and give them research papers on it to back it up.
Yeah.
And just to see
it's
their reaction.
Rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Matt. Ben and Georgia, just in terms of going out after you finish your degree, going out into the workforce, what was your experience actually applying for jobs, interviewing for jobs, and then securing them once you'd finished your study?
To be honest, applications for jobs, I did plenty of those with not much success early on. I think that the key there is just got to be persistent. For me, personally, I was applying for both academic and more applied sports science roles. And, with the Reds, in terms of interview process, obviously they just want to know that you kind of know what you're talking about. You've built up skills through the university degree, which separate you from other applicants. So things like actually having used GPS units, having contact with athletes before that job were two things that really helped me a lot, I think, because I knew that I was kind of prepared just to go in there and get the job done.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, I was a little bit lucky in that I was pretty specific with what I knew I wanted to do once I graduated. So that sort of limited the number of applications I had to do, because there's only a certain number of hospitals that you kind of can get work in. So I didn't actually have to do that many applications, and Queensland Health has a graduate program that I got onto. So they offer 30 positions a year across Queensland for graduates. So that's the program that I got onto. It was very competitive to get through. So I think at the hospital that I'm at, there was 3 positions and 160 odd applicants. So quite competitive. But we did lots of prep as part of our degree in our last year. We had specific subjects throughout the last year on resume writing and interviewing for those jobs in particular, just because they are quite competitive. A lot of my other friends who went into other private practice, like our whole cohort got jobs in physio, so everyone got jobs. and they all did, when people who wanted to go into private practice, they all found it sort of a pretty easy process because you do those specific training things quite early on.
Yep, thanks guys. So we've got actually a question from the audience here. What was the most valuable thing that you learned throughout your degree that prepared you for work? That'd be a difficult question to answer, but if you can.
Do you want me to go first? You've stumped him and stumped me. Yeah, look, I think that outside of the content, obviously, all the content is very important for base understanding and knowledge of certain principles. But the biggest thing is, I think, is learning how to communicate with all different types of people from different age groups, from different walks of life, from lectures, so people that are superior to you, I suppose you could say, all the way through to your fellow peers. Being able to learn effective communication, and every day at university you have to talk to people, and you learn to get better at it. So really, when you're in classrooms, when you're interacting with staff and also your peers, take as much out of that as you can, because I've found that those soft skills, which you don't get taught, you have to kind of learn them yourself, and university is the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a big one that you kind of can take out of your degree. And from early on with physio, you do subjects with other disciplines. So we did subjects with nurses and with OTs and speech pathologists, which your whole career then becomes, I mean, certainly for me in the hospitals. I think the other big one that I took out of my degree was learning how to problem solve and learning how to think about problems, so that you can sort of step into your job and you've learnt all of this content and you won't know it all perfectly, and there's lots of people who know a lot more than you do. But if you've got those basic problem solving skills and the basic information there, you can step back and apply it to treating any person or working with any person, because you've got the fundamental skills on how to problem solve and how to work through from the sickest patient in ICU through to your basic patient. You've got those fundamental problem-solving, thinking skills there, I think, which are sort of built on right from the beginning of your degree, which were probably the most helpful, I think, for me.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys. So, Matt, do you have anything to add to that, like valuable things that you've learned throughout this process or throughout your degree so far that's helped you with your work that you're doing with athletes at the moment?
I'd agree with everything George has said, as well as one of my lecturers commented very early in my degree of adding points of difference.
Yep.
Over and above the very minimum for your resume and your professional career development.
Yeah, and has that been, obviously adding points of difference is nice, but has it been easy to do throughout your degree so far? So I know you said that you've been doing some lab tech work as well here at the university, and has that helped, obviously, build up those points of difference?
It definitely helps.
Yep.
It's not easy.
Yep.
I'm pretty fortunate in the fact that I'm a non-school leaver.
Yep.
So I had some relationships developed outside of uni that I was able to cultivate for positive outcomes.
Yep, cool. And this is probably a question for all of you, but when you started your degree, did you have in mind what you wanted to do at the end of it, and did that change throughout the process? And when did you did it, obviously starting an exercise science degree, you come in, you might enjoy exercise and sport, and you don't really know where you want to be at the end of it, and when do you sort of open your eyes to how much opportunity there is out there, and has it really changed from day one to now? Everyone, yep.
My initial concept of exercise and sports science was a certain path, and that's probably not where I'm going to go down.
Yep.
I never thought of myself as a researcher, and previous experience would not indicate that, but I'm definitely got goals and ambitions for postgraduate
Yep.
qualifications, and starting to navigate down that path now.
And what sort of opened your eyes to the research then? Has it been the content you've been covering on the degree, or is it chatting to lecturers, or being exposed to some of the research that they're doing as well at the university?
Well, all three.
Yep.
Yep, for sure.
And you obviously think that's going to be something you're going to pursue at ACU as well?
Potentially, yes.
Yep.
Yes. I'm currently discussing with my practicum coordinator as well as the course coordinator some avenues for me
Cool.
as well. So
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think every semester I was changing my mind about what I wanted to do. It'd be a really interesting subject. So I think one semester we learned all about the brain and the neural system, and I thought how cool it'd be to rehab spinal injury patients. So I was looking up all different options in that field, and then testing a prescription, and how cool it'd be to work with the world's best athletes and helps make them better. So that kind of led into that research avenue, I suppose. We talk about point of difference. Matt was mentioning that before. It's a lot of the point of difference comes from doing a lot of reading in exercise and sports science. So research papers, in particular for me, was all the applied sports science stuff. So I was reading a lot, and that kind of moved me into okay, let's start researching how do we make these athletes better. And this is where I am now as a sports scientist. That's basically what a sports scientist does, is they find a problem, do research to find the answer, and then another problem comes up. So it's just a cycle. But yeah, short answer, I changed my mind of what I wanted to do plenty of times.
And for you, Ben?
Yeah, I was much the same. I kind of just fell into physio a little bit. I had a really wide range of preferences when I first applied to university, and physio just kind of happened to be number one. Got in and kind of thought, oh, gee, what am I going to do with this? So then thought I was going to use that as my undergrad to go and do medicine. But then as the degree went on, and I kind of learnt what physio could do and got some exposure into the industry in a few sort of areas, sort of fell in love with this sort of quite particular area that before I started the degree I didn't even know it sort of existed. But then once I kind of knew about that and had got a bit of experience there, I was pretty set on doing that. And so I was able to be quite focused and work towards just sort of achieving that quite specific thing for the last couple of years of my degree, which I think sort of helped me get into working where I am now. But yeah, it changed a bunch.
Cool, thanks guys. So we've got a question here coming in about study-life balance, and did any of you stay on or near campus? Obviously no accommodation here at Brisbane at the moment. Did you stay near campus, and if not, why not? And how did travel affect you getting here? Was it easy? And then what was your study-life balance like as well whilst you were here at uni and potentially working as well?
I moved down. I didn't live in Brisbane before I started the degree, so I moved to Brisbane and lived just with friends that I knew, and I lived only sort of 20, 30 minutes away, so not overly far away.
That's everywhere in Brisbane, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's all pretty, no, it's too far away. And so getting here was relatively easy, and there's great parking here on this campus, so I just drove and parked every day. Work-life balance I found fine. I worked multiple jobs. I was doing sort of volunteer work as part of physio.
And you were still full-time student?
Studying full-time.
Yep.
Had a couple of sort of casual jobs, volunteering, played in heaps of sports teams still while I was here. So, I mean, it was busy, but yeah, certainly very manageable work-life balance. Once you kind of figure out what you're wanting to do and how hard you're kind of willing to work for what marks you want. So.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I was still involved with a bunch of sporting teams, worked a couple of different jobs throughout my degree, but I suppose it's whatever you want to put in. I put in a lot of extra hours because I was doing the research stuff on the side. So, you can get away with not doing much at all and having a great social life, but I treated uni as a full-time job and then just extra work on the weekends and on my days off as well. So, but I've never had a problem socialising or keeping up the sporting side of things.
To answer that question, yeah, work-life balance is very strong. I live very close to the uni, and there is very good public transport facilities for the north side of Brisbane, as well as we got the ACU shuttle buses, yeah. So,
Yep.
as well as the parking that Ben mentioned. So
Good bike paths as well for
correct,
riding
yes,
your bike
for
in it.
cyclists, yes, yeah. Yeah.
So that makes it nice and easy, I guess, doesn't it? Actually getting to and from campus is, even for staff as well, it's nice and easy. So, we've got one here actually for you, Ben, just on physiotherapy. With the 3 fourth-year placements, would you suggest one hospital, one rural, and one private practice? I know you touched on this a bit before, but maybe a bit more information would be good.
Yeah, so it's actually 5 6-week placements over the year. So you do, and that's split depending on how they do it. You actually can't do it like that. So you've got to do one in sort of private practice type of physiotherapy. Now that might be in a private practice, that might be in a hospital, it could be in a number of areas. You've got to do one neurology, which might be sort of working with stroke patients, it might be working with Parkinson's patients, it's quite broad. And then you've got to do one cardiorespiratory, which is typically in a hospital. You don't have a lot of control over where you go, just because sort of across this uni and then the other unis that offer physio, there's only so many positions. So you certainly can have some preference, but you will get moved around. You don't have a lot of choice about that. Then the other 2 placements you can put in preferences. So I preferenced the type of physio that I wanted to do. So I wanted an intensive care placement, so that's what I preferenced. I know other people who were really set on getting a job in a particular hospital didn't care what type of physio they did, they just wanted to work. They wanted a placement in that hospital so that they had that experience there. And then there was people who really wanted private practice and they had a connection with a friend who ran a private practice, and so they could then get experience there. So you do have some flexibility, but it is, there's 100 odd students at this university alone, and there's only so much flexibility within that system, as well as to kind of meet registration guidelines. You've got to do those 3 specific type of placements in that 4th year.
I mean, obviously with physio being offered in Sydney and in Melbourne, was there any opportunity to pick up some placements down there? For students that want to go.
So my placement that I did down in Sydney, I was there with 3 students from the Sydney campus who do physio down on the Sydney campus, and we were all at the same hospital together. I know there was some people who went and did rural placements out near where they had family. Someone went, I think, out to Gundawindi Hospital, out west. I know, there was a few who went down to Melbourne. So there is, and that certainly, if you're willing to travel a little bit more, you can sometimes be a bit more flexible or have a better chance of getting the preferences that you're after. Because it's just easier to find than in sort of a metropolitan area sometimes.
Cool, thanks. Got another question in here from Ben, so thanks, Ben, for sending this in. Probably for you, Georgia, best one to answer this. In terms of exercise science, what opportunities in your career are opened up with completing a PhD? Apart from wanting to spend a load of time at uni.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, isn't it? No. A PhD automatically sets you above 90% or 99% of the exercise science graduates. And, PhD, it's a bit of paper, but the skills that you get out of doing a PhD look really good to, potential employers. So things like problem solving, time management, working with big groups of people, being able to manage a lot of data. That looks really good to the people that employed me. So the skills that you get out of doing a PhD, that sets you apart from just an exercise science graduate or even just doing an honours. The paper's good and the floppy hat's nice, but the skills you get are even better.
And just to add to that, I came out to Australia and did my PhD from the UK, and it's opened up some wonderful opportunities for me. I actually did my PhD here at ACU, so it's been a great experience for me going on to do a PhD, and like Georgia said, it just opens a lot more doors and does give you some really, really key skills that are useful for if you want to go into academia or to go into professional practice and work with high performance athletes as well. So it's obviously further on down the line, but if you are wanting to think of the research side of things like Matt spoke about, then get in there early and look for opportunities with lecturers, because everyone's always looking for people to help out with their research, and like Georgia did during her second year at uni, and also looking for research participants as well. So if you are interested in research, then there's plenty of opportunities here at ACU to get that done. we've got another one actually for you, Ben, from Patrick again. So thanks, Patrick, for all the questions. But with placements of physiotherapy or studying overseas, is it within the Commonwealth, or what are the restrictions? Is there any opportunities overseas? I know you did that study in Rome, but is there any opportunities for placements overseas, or do they have to be here in Australia?
No, you can do a number of placements overseas. So my one in Rome was just one of my subjects that I did.
Was that at the campus?
Yeah, we've got a ACU campus in Rome, so I did that there. With a few people. I think you can go to New York and London and Paris now as part of that same program. But then the physio-specific placements, where you're doing prac as a physio, they're usually linked to partner institutions. So there's a number of them. I can't remember. They're getting more and more. I was back here at Open Day not that long ago and was listening to the talk, and there's way more options now than when I was here. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but I know Denmark's one. Vietnam is one. Maybe somewhere in South America. We've got a partner university there that we're doing exchange programs with now. So they've usually got to be organised by the university though. So the Physio Council, or the body who sort of regulates being qualified as a physio, has to approve their program. It's a bit technical, but in short, you can't go organising your own placement just at if you've got a mate somewhere who's got a private practice, in the UK or something, you can't do that. It's got to be certified through the university, but there's definitely lots of opportunities, and it seems like there's more and more every year that I come back. So I'm sure by the time you're coming through, there'll be plenty of opportunities. Cool.
Right, we've got one more question for you guys. What's the biggest myth or misconception about your role or industry, your job that you might do? What was, myth or misconception?
I think I kind of mentioned it before, which is just, I don't think many people kind of understand how broad physio can be. I think everyone's sort of got quite a narrow idea, or they've been down to their private physio for, a sore back, or they've torn their ACL or something like that. But physio is massive. If there's an area of medicine that you've heard about, there's probably an area of physio that goes along with it. So from, ICU, or through to women's health and pregnancy, through to geriatrics and stroke rehab. It's really broad. I don't think any of my friends really understand what I do for a job. I think a lot of people just kind of think of massage as is what physios do, but it's really very broad career.
I suppose exercise science is similar in terms of the broad scope that you can come out of an exercise science degree with. But a myth is probably that everyone's going to work with professional athletes. A lot of the time students come into the exercise science degree in first year expecting that that's going to be the outcome. But if we think about, rugby teams, for example, in Australia, there's 3 of them, and there's 18 AFL teams and something like that for NRL. 16 NRL teams. So think about in Australia and the actual demand for sports scientists or whatever it might be in professional sport, it's limited. So if that's your passion project, then go for it. I've done it. Rich has worked in elite sport, so it is possible. But don't shelter yourself off to other opportunities, because exercise science, there's so many different avenues that you can get out of it. Basically, every subject you go into, there is a potential for a job in each of those areas. So 3 years and eight subjects each year. So there's plenty of opportunities.
Cool, thanks very much. Got a question for you now, Matt, actually. So being a non-school leaver, can you tell us what it was like to study as an older student, or should we say mature student or older student? Which you...
I'm old, yes.
And how long were you off, how long were you between drinks then in terms of studying?
So I graduated Queensland High School in 1991 and started studying in 2018.
Yeah,
so quite a large...
Yeah, and obviously a lot has changed since then in education. So how was that getting back into study?
It was a hurdle, but in saying that, I had good people around me both prior to coming back to uni and once university started, that exposed me to all the resources here and the facilities like the library, academic skills unit, which I mentioned. But I found talking to the lecturers, those points of differences before that we mentioned,
Yeah.
as well as prior life experience,
Yeah.
was a definite advantage.
Yeah. So if you had one tip for someone coming in, older student, hadn't studied for 10 years, what would it be?
Be aware of the facilities and the resources that
Yep.
we have here, and building the relationship professionally with the lecturers, so you can get that knowledge.
Yep.
But also being aware of, academic skills unit, the library, and utilising the librarians and working with them, how to find a research paper
Yep.
to reference, how to reference properly, because that's all time management,
Yeah. Yeah.
We even discussed the other day, there was a first year student only last year, spent 8 hours on an assignment just doing the referencing section.
Yeah, which you can,
Yeah.
is automated in 10 minutes if you
Yeah.
go and ask the right people, and the right people are here to help you, obviously.
Yep. And even other things like the medical clinic here and the exercise physiology clinic
Yep.
that you have available to you as a student.
Yep.
So,
Cool. This one's to everyone, but based on placements or career so far, how does the job differ from what you expected? So Georgia, is your job at the Queensland Reds different to what you expected it to be? And I think everyone's got the when they see professional sport, they see the bright lights lifting the trophy at the end on grand final day. But obviously, there's a lot that goes into that. And
Yep.
yep.
It's not glamorous. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, like I said, it's early mornings. It's you're surrounded by 40 very immature men every day. That's not including staff. Nah, just joking. So yeah, look, there's, like with any job, there's highs and lows. I think that definitely the highs are outweighing the lows, but yeah, the hours and the data crunching and not doing so well on the weekend is also hard. But you don't really get much time off. You can't ever really turn your emails off in professional sport. You always have to be available, whether that's during the season or out of season, on weekends, night times. So yeah, I suppose that's been probably a bit of a shocker. Just the contact hours, and things like washing GPS vests.
Yep.
We collect GPS data every day, and I'm lucky enough that I've got assistants that help me with that, but I still get my hands dirty. I still fill up water bottles if we're down a few hands. So, if you come into a prac placement in professional sport at the Queensland Reds as an example, you've got to put in those hard yards, fill up those water bottles, wash the sweaty vests, urine samples, it all comes with it. But if you spend the time outside of those training hours with the people that are in charge, you will get a lot more out of it than that.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's sort of been quite similar to sort of what I expected. I think because we're lucky to spend that last year working full time in a variety of areas. But certainly there's parts of it that are different. I think the hours are a big part of it. Sort of being on call overnight, working night shift is sort of, you're not asked to do that as a student, so that takes a little bit to get used to. And then, yeah, in a similar way, there's lots of dirty parts of physio that don't get put on the posters. Like particularly when you're working in a hospital, I think if you'd told me the number of sort of old people I would have helped take to the toilet before I got into the degree, I wouldn't have believed you. But I mean, it's sort of, there's all of those sort of parts, but equally there's sort of these amazing parts that you just kind of don't hear about as well too. So I think it's been largely what I expected because we do get such a broad range, but there's always little things that you're surprised by.
Yeah. And this is a question to all of you. What sort of made you choose the degree and also made you choose ACU?
Like I said before, I kind of just fell into physio a little bit. It's just what I happened to put down as my first preference. But I put down ACU first because in the back of my head, one of the options was medicine. And when I looked at the course overview, the ACU physio program had the broadest range of sort of topic areas in terms of really covering in depth your neuro and your cardiorespiratory stuff, perhaps more than some of the other courses that I looked at. And so I thought that if I was going to go into medicine, that broad background would sort of set me up pretty well.
Yeah, I think, I suppose if I start with the university and choosing ACU, I actually started at a different university in Queensland, straight out of school, and I just found that I didn't get the support that I probably was wanting. There was a lot of students and not too many staff, so I took a year off after a year at another university, and was obviously very interested in sport, how the body works, how to make just myself better, because I was still playing a lot of sport at the time. And ACU come up as an option as a smaller university, with a good level of staff to student ratio. And yeah, honestly, that I thrived in that environment. Just having, like Matt said, just the contact hours with the staff was amazing, really.
What brought me to exercise science was probably my passion in my recreational life as a cyclist. Just reading up on exercise physiology. And the reason I chose ACU was I had an advisor, late 2017, tell me about the exercise science program here. And I came and checked it out and applied, and I love it.
Yeah.
I live, breathe, eat exercise science every day.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. So what's been the most rewarding part of everyone's journey here so far? If you can rack your brains and have a think.
The most rewarding was actually very recent for me. I was saying I work with some para-athletes, so seeing just the way they spoke and interacted and how they've developed, seeing them achieve their goals.
Yep.
For me.
Yep. Great stuff.
Yeah, probably a pretty obvious one for me is completing a PhD. If you asked me 10 years ago if that was going to happen, I would have said, you are kidding yourself. But here I am, I did it, so that's probably number one. But also applying everything that I've learned over, a 7-8 year period of studying and research. I'm applying it with people that are the best in their field, and I'm making them better, one way or another. And that's pretty exciting.
I think there's one in particular that I think of who was this sort of relatively young guy who got admitted to ICU and was there for a really long period of time. Basically got to the point where we couldn't do a lot with him for so long that he got to being bedbound, and then working with him and getting to the point that he could sort of basically walk out of the ICU is pretty rewarding. And when you're working with someone for that long, you kind of build pretty sort of special relationships day in and day out in sort of what's probably the most intense period of their life. So there's moments like that every day, but this young guy was probably the most memorable.
Cool. Right, I've just got one last question for you all now, guys, and we can wrap things up. But what advice would you give to someone who's thinking of a degree in either physiotherapy or exercise science?
I think sort of two little bits of advice would be stay broad, don't narrow yourself too early. I talk to a lot of people who are keen to get into physio and they think they've got a really specific idea about what they want to do, which is great, but don't narrow yourself off too early, because you might try something and love it, or you might commit yourself to something that you don't actually enjoy once you get to try it. And then the other thing is just figure out how hard you have to work to get the marks you want to get. So if you want 7s, then you need to figure out how hard that is. So that's sort of what I did, and it sort of seemed to work reasonably well for me.
Yeah, both really valid points there from Ben. Obviously, come in with an open mind with exercise science. Yes, it's a broad field, but rather than looking at that as a negative, think of that as a positive, I would strongly suggest. Also, I think that be ready to work outside of the university subjects. They are there to give you the base knowledge. Okay, that's almost like, yep, tick that off, I know the base knowledge. Okay, what can I do to set myself apart from the 1,000 other graduates that are graduating the exercise science degree every year around Australia or whatever it is. So do the degree, do it well, but start picking up as much prac experience as you can, and use your lecturers, because a lot of them have worked in the fields that you're interested in. So use them as sounding boards.
I think Ben and Georgia have nailed it.
Yep.
Just do it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Matt.